Hey, comrades, what's up? All right, so we're on to fairy tale number 11, and it's really starting to get good over in the Tower of Heaven. So first we head over to Erza, which is where the Magic Council is meeting. They're continuing to discuss and argue and debate whether they should use the Magic Square or the Cannon of Heaven or whatever. And then we see a shot of Sigrin's talking about how he needs one more vote, and then we go over to Jalil, and he also says one more vote, huh? And then there's one of the guys who's friends with Makarov, who can like fade into walls. He's like very concerned about this whole situation. Jalil's like little servant fella who's standing there with the long hair. He's like, "Are you talking to yourself?" And Jalil's like, "It's none of your business. Get out of here." He doesn't say get out of here. But then we head back down to Erza and crew, and they're talking about Zareth and how the lullaby demon was related to Zareth, and so was Del Eora, and that Zareth had he's a black wizard who was able to summon giant creatures, and they all talk about this for a little bit, and then Lucy and Gray give Erza a hard time for feeling like she betrayed her friends when she didn't, according to her story, and we're talking about that and how they really appreciate her. And then Sho shows up, and he's like, "What are you talking about? You can't mean this. She's lying to you." And then he talks about how Jalil saved them from a bomb that Erza put on the ship to blow them up so they'd have to stay on the island. And then there's some more back and forth about that being true or not, and Sho's getting like super pissed off about all this time and stuff. And then Simon shows up. Simon's the guy he's the guy with the iron jaw, who was fighting Gray and Juvia, and essentially he's like, Erza's right. And he also says that he knew that he was destroying like a maker statue of Gray, which is why I went out, because this whole time he was he wanted Erza to come over here to stop Jalil, because over the 8 years he never believed Jalil, and he always believed in Erza. And they have like a touching little moment with a hug and everything, and then Sho gets like super concerned about being betrayed and all this craziness. And then so they talk about that. Simon's super excited. They got the strongest wizards to come over here. And then Lucy's like, "Am I a strongest wizard too?" And then they got to go combine their strengths to rescue Natsu, because Natsu's going to be required to fight Jalil. Meanwhile, Natsu's in the cat room, and he puts on like a cat hat, and he's like, "Woo wee!" And then what's this guy's name? Wally. Wally shows up. He's the gun pixelated guy. And so then he's about to shoot Natsu. The rest of them are like running over to help Natsu and stop that from happening, and talking about. And then Simon mentions that hey, you guys, Natsu can't be using like all his powers. You don't understand like how powerful he actually is. And then he says, when Natsu's true dragon power comes to rest within him, evil is bound to fall. And then we get back to Natsu, and then I think her name is Millie. It's the cat girl. She's like, "No, you cannot attack the cat." And the guy's like, "That's not a cat. That's someone or a cat mask." And then Natsu's like, "Nya," which is meow in Japanese. And then the Polygon guy starts fighting him and doing attacks, and then he's fighting back, and then finally Malil is like, "Wait a second, that's a person in a cat costume." And so she grabs him with her little thing that stops magic powers, and then they're beating up on him when all of a sudden Happy comes in and whacks Wally in the face. And then Natsu does his ultimate attack on Millie, which is it's like sad cat. Where he's pretending to be a really sad cat. And she's like, "Oh my gosh." And so she releases him. So he's able to use his like a super fire attack. And then we go up to Jilly's, has like a chessboard with all the pieces of all the different representations of all the people in this battle or in the tower. And he's knocking some over. He's like, "Well, that's so much for that." And then he's like, "All right, well, Sho and Simon betrayed me, and Wally and Malil got defeated. So it's up to you, Vidalas," who's the guy been standing there. And then he's like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yes." And then he does some sort of like desync. And instead of being one guy, he's actually three guys. He's Trinity Raven. They are the Assassin's Guild Death Head Caucus Special Guerrilla Squad. And there's like Owl Guy, Hot Babe, and Crazy Rocker Guy. All right, so then Natsu and Happy finally get the helmet off. And then Wally is waking up, and they're like chit-chatting about that. And then they all get like mouths all over the walls, which is how Jalil like puts commands out. It's super creepy. And Erza's like, "Fuck." And he says, "Hey, I summoned 3 minions to help me, so it's gonna be you 7 versus the 4 of us. And then if I get defeated, then I get defeated. But if I can sacrifice Erza, then you lose." And I'm like, that's not really a game as much as like what was just gonna happen anyway. And then he also says sometime soon that the council is right now voting on using Ethereum to come down and destroy everything. And Erza and Lucy are like, "Oh fuck." And then Sho gets super concerned, so he puts Erza in a card, which makes her invincible, I guess. And then he like runs off. And then Natsu is like, "We got this." And then he takes off with Happy up the tower. And then Wally's like, I can help." Oh no, because Natsu's not there yet. So then Simon's like, fuck. And he's like, all right, two of you, I'm going to go after Sho. Two of you go find Natsu. And then the other one. And then Juvia's like, me and Gray are going to go find Erza. Let's see. We'll go this way to find Natsu. You go that way by yourself. And Lucy's like, why? I'm the weakest. Meanwhile, Natsu grabs Happy and he's like, all right, top of the tower, here we go. So then they start rocking to the top of the tower, and then they get hit by Owlface. And then Owlface is the Justice Knight Fukuro has come. And so then they like shonen anime fight. Oh, also Simon shows up to Natsu, and then the owl like turns off the lights, or the other guy turns off the lights, but the owl doesn't need the lights because he's an owl or something. And then, okay, that's when they start anime fighting, or shonen battle fighting. So then they fight. Natsu's getting beat up a little bit, but he's holding strong. Jilla does some chess moves, and then we head over to Juvia and Lucy. So apparently Gray's like, I'm going to go find Shu. You guys go find Natsu. Go. And so they're chit-chatting. Juvia's a little like perturbed that she's with Lucy because they're like both competing for Gray's attention, and Lucy's like, I am not. Then they have like this crazy noise, and it's the rocker guy, and he's got crazy hair, and they talk about his hair. It's where a lot of his magic comes from. And then he's he like tries to slice Lucy and Juvia, but obviously Juvia's made of water, so it doesn't do anything, and Lucy like runs the fuck out of there. And then Juvia tries to entrance him in like her water cube, but he breaks free because his hair absorbs water. It's kind of a shitty ability. But then he does something where he like gets music inside Juvia's head so that she becomes his like succubus. So she looks totally different, like her tongue sticking out. She's got like a tattoo on her stomach, and like she's wearing like rocker duds. And then Lucy's like, oh, fuck me. And so then Juvia's like calling her a sow and getting ready to fight her and talking about how she needs to rock. And then she does this like water attacks, and she tries to tear off Lucy's clothes, and Lucy has to take her headband and put it over her boobs. Excellent. And then she keeps whacking her around. And then at some point, while she's being like torrented around, she hears Juvia inside the water, because like once she's inside the water, she's inside Juvia, right? And then her and Juvia have a conversation about being friends and about Fairy Tail, and how Juvia is going to be welcome there, and how they're so excited. Lucy's like super excited to be your friend, and that and then she gets knocked out, and then like succubus Juvia is kind of stunned for a second, but she's still kind of being evil. And so then Lucy tears some of her skirts, so we get some more thigh action, which is always a pleasure. Before Juvia like dives back in to get her, and of course Lucy pulls out Aquarius, the gate of the water bearer, and summons her inside Juvia. And then this causes like an excessive amount of water because Aquarius is super pissed that she got summoned. And then so Juvia and the guy and Lucy are all being like in the water, and the guy's like, whatever, I'll just absorb the water. And then Juvia and Lucy do this epic fucking friendship is magic move where they both reach out and grab each other's hands, and then they do a, what do you call it? They do magic fusion, and they're like, we're gonna send you more water than you can take, and they do. It's called they do a unison raid, and it's super awesome. And they just devastate this guy so much that he goes completely bald. It destroys his hair, which is his magic power. And then they hug it out, and we're like, we're friends, hooray! That Aquarius is like, I'm gonna go on another vacation with my boyfriend. You're gonna agree that I'm not gonna be someone for 2 more weeks? And Lucy's like, and she's like, you will agree. And Lucy's like, okay, I agree. And then Aquarius is like, you need to get yourself a boyfriend, you loser, and then takes off. And then Lucy's like, oh my god, I can't believe we did that. We're so awesome. And even Jalil's like, oh, is it come up here? I think he gets to it a little bit later. Okay, so then at this point, Juvia and Lucy are becoming friends. They talk about, you don't have to call me Lucy-san, we're friends. And then Juvia's like crying, and they're like, stop crying, silly. We're friends. You're part of the team. And then Jalil, who's like watching it, is like, holy shit, like I heard a story about this monk who spent like his entire life preparing to do a unison raid, and when he tried, he failed. And like these 2 girls who are like 18, I think they're 17, Juvia might be 18, but Lucy's like 17. It's like I was unable or able to do it. And then we head back over to Ura, and Sigrin is still yelling with everybody and talking about the summon. He's like, I got one more thing to tell you guys to trick you into doing this thing, and that's that they're trying to summon Zeref, the Black Magician. And then it's like, uh-oh. And then he's like, they're like, you better tell us everything. And then we head back to Natsu's fight with Fakuro, I think is what his name. Anyway, he's doing like a missile attack and all this stuff, and Natsu's like on the rock. He's on the missile flying around, so he's getting sick. And then the Birdman eats him so he can absorb his powers, and it's like, haha. And then Happy goes to fight him and gets struck with the fire. We then back over to the council, and apparently the council's voted like 9-1. The only guy who didn't vote for it was Makarov's friend. He's like, I washed my hands of this whole thing. You're going to kill these lives and blah, 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 blah. And then we see Sigrid and Jalil continue to like be incommunicado together, right? We then head back in time to when Erza first arrived at Fairy Tale, and she's like something something, and then so this whole section really focuses on Gray. So Gray is remembering during he rolls up to fight the bird guy and rescue Natsu, but at the same time he keeps thinking about Erza and like why he's close to Erza and why he wants to, what gives him his strength in his fighting. So he goes and he's Simon, what's wrong? It's that guy stopped me and ate Natsu, and Happy's like, and so then Gray's like, I'm gonna fight you. So he starts fighting, and then the bird guy's using like Natsu's fire magic, and everyone's like, oh shit, he's totally dead. And then we get like another flashback. Erza's like by herself, and Gray goes to like bother her, and she's like, they're like yelling at she like snaps back at him, and Gray's froze all the fire, and the guy's like, holy fuck. And then he goes to eat Gray, and then Gray freezes his mouth, and he's like, oh no, I'm in a lot of trouble now. And then he's like, I have no time for this shitty games. And then we go back in time again. We get some Gray's like arguing with some of the guild members about Erza and how he's going to go fight her again, and he's going to beat her this time. And he goes and finds her by the river in the town, and she's crying. And he's like, why are you crying? And she's like, I'm not crying. I'm coming here to be alone. He's like, why do you want to be alone? And she's like, because I like being alone. He's like, why are you crying? And then we go back to the fight. He just beats the shit out of this guy, knocks Natsu out of his mouth. And then he talks about how Erza has to be in Fairy Tale because it'll make her so she doesn't have to cry anymore. And then Natsu's like laying there, and Simon's like, holy shit. And the other guy's like, knock the fuck out. And then Simon's like, holy shit, that guy's a lot stronger than I thought. And the Gray's like, all right, I'm a little hurt, but I'll be okay. We then go back over to Era, where the Magic Council is getting the Ethereum ready, and it's about 6% magical charge. We get some guys talking about it, how legally they're doing magic to destroy a bunch of people in their country, but because of Zareth and international treaties, it's going to be okay. And the guy's like, I don't care about these treaties, it's about a person. And then we get Altair and Sigrid standing on like a balcony, and they're discussing some very shady shit, like how Sigrid's going to die if he fails. And then Makarov's friend, the guy he's like in the wall, he's like listening in and he's like very concerned. And then Sigrid makes a comment that all this is worth it, all the sketchy stuff is worth it for the sake of his ideals. And then back with Jalil, he's doing his chess knockout stuff, and then he's like, well, we're never going to see each other again, Sigrid, but it's all worth it for my ideals. We then catch up with Sho, who's still got Erza in a cart, and he's running, and then he runs into like the Japanese geisha lady, who was one of the Assassin Guild people. Her name's Ikaruga, the dove, and she's good at like sword shit. So the guy tries to put her in a card, and he cuts all her cards up, and then he cuts her, and then she's going to cut Erza up, even though it's like a trans-dimensional space or some bullshit. But Erza's able to use her sword just like before when Lucy got rescued by the guy with the knife, and she's able to block, and then finally Sho like releases her from the card, and she comes out. And then her in a Kagura, it's like time to fight, but a Kagura just keeps destroying her armor as they fight. So it's like she's destroying her armor, she destroys some of her swords. Erza keeps changing armor, and then she like pulls out purgatory armor, which is like no one who has ever seen this armor has like lived or something. Let's see. There is no one who has ever seen this armor and stood to fight against it, right? But then the lady destroys that armor too, and then Erza's like, all right, fuck it. And so she transforms into like her fiery pants and her like bandage around her breasts with the two katanas outfit, which I don't know if she's had this before in here. I don't remember. I've seen it plenty of times, like from the games and stuff, but it's hot stuff. And then we get another flashback. She's remembering like Gray and everything he said, and like the old grandpa told him to go to Fairy Tale and all her friends, and Natsu challenging her, and her just being sad, and how she always hid in her armor to cry and get away from the world, and how the people in Fairy Tale made her feel like a family, and that she's going to protect them no matter what, and that the armor is not her real magic or her real strength, that it kind of helped her hide herself away. And then she says she's going to use all her strength and everything she's got inside to defeat this woman. And dun dun dun, that wraps up Volume 11 of Fairy Tale. So good. It's so good. Some excellent Lucy action with Juvia, and then everything else is just badass as hell as well. So I'm glad, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.